You found a townhouse in Cloverdale for 975,000 and you think to yourself you can make it work. And then the rates move 0.5% and suddenly you can. Nobody told you that the price didn't change. Your buying power did. So if you've been watching this series from the start, welcome back. And we've covered from how bank approvals don't mean affordability. We've talked about how real cost of ownership beyond your mortgage, and we went through why draining your savings on your down payment is a trap. And in the last episode, we ran the math on renting versus buying. Today, we're talking about something that feels invisible until it isn't, and that's the interest rates. Now, we're not talking in terms of, that the Bank of Canada met yesterday way. It's more like this number directly changes how much of a home you can buy. So here's the thing, most first time buyers get it backwards. They're watching the housing market, they track listing prices in Fleetwood, Cloverdale, or Clayton in South Surrey, and then they obsess over whether prices are going up or down. And they mostly ignore rates. That's the wrong thing to ignore. Let me show you exactly what I mean. So let's say you were approved for $4,000 a month in a mortgage payment, and that's your ceiling, and that's what the bank said yes to. At a 5.5% interest rate for a 25-year amortization, the payment buys you roughly a $680,000 mortgage. Now, if the rate drops to 4.5%, that $4,000 payment, same income, same everything, the same payment now buys you a $745,000 mortgage. That's a $65,000 more purchasing power from 1%. So, what does that mean? That's the difference between a condo in Guildford and a townhouse in Newton. And that's not a rounding error, that's just a completely different home. Now, I want you to flip the scenario and let's say you got approved 6 months ago for 4.8%, and then you've been shopping, taking your time, and then now the rates have gone up to 5.3%. Your purchasing power just quietly dropped from 40,000 to 50,000, okay? And the listings didn't change, your income didn't change, but your budget did, and no one called you. Here's where that stress test makes this sharper. In Canada, you don't qualify at your actual contract rate. You qualify at a contract rate plus 2% or 5.25, whichever is higher at that point of time. So if you're negotiating a 5-year fixed mortgage at 4.9%, then the bank's qualifying you at 6.9%. What does this mean in real terms? On a household income of $130,000 in Metro Vancouver with 10% down on a $950,000 property, that stress test rate caps your GDS around 39% and TDS at 44%. The math at 6.9% qualifying rate means some buyers in Panorama Ridge are getting approved for less than they expected. And even when the listing rates look reasonable, a client I worked last spring thought they were comfortably approved. Rates had shifted slightly, and since their pre approval, when we ran the same numbers, their actual purchasing power had moved down from to about $600,000. Same buyer, 3 months later, different ceiling. That's not a horror story. That's just how it works. And knowing it early means you can plan around it. So, what do you actually do with this? First, get a pre approval close to when you aren't ready to buy. Okay, not 8 months out. Pre approval typically locks a rate for like 90 to 120 days. After that, you are requalifying at whatever the interest rate is. Second, the stress test your budget and not just the banks. Okay, what I tell every first time buyer who sits down with me is like run your numbers at your contract rate and then 0.5% higher. If the higher rate breaks your budget, you're already at the ceiling. Third, understand that your real purchasing price is a moving target. In my market here in Surrey, 0.5 point rate can shift that what's accessible to you by a full neighborhood tier, like Sullivan Heights versus Wally, and a two-bedroom townhouse versus a one-bedroom condo. There's a real difference, not a theoretical one. Rates and price gaps do not move in sync, and the gap is where the buyers get surprised. Prices might stay flat for 6 months, but if the rates climb, at 0.75% in the same window, your effective purchase price just went up, even though no listings changed. You did not get priced out by the market, you got priced out by the rate. And that is a very solvable problem if you're watching the right number. So, we have one episode left in this series, and it might be the most personally relevant one yet. Episode 6, it's about buying at the very top of your budget right before life change. New baby, job transition, one income going to part time. The approval was real, the timing was wrong. We'll run the math next.